Welcome to Casual Watch Talk, the podcast from the Casual Watch Reviewer YouTube channel. Join us as we talk everything watches, from watch collecting, the latest horology news and interviews. If you're not already subscribed, subscribe on your favourite podcast app. Let's dive into the show. Hi everyone, welcome back to Casual Watch Talk. You're with Sam from the Casual Watch Review channel and Chris from Everyday Mastery. How have you been, Chris?
Hey guys. Good.
So welcome back to the podcast. Today we've got a couple of interesting things to talk about. Main topic is going to be on watch brands, so stick around for that. But first of all, as is customary with these shows, Chris, what have you been wearing this week?
I have just popped on my Bell & Ross come back from service. So
it came back in like record time, that, didn't it?
Yeah, it was 2 weeks, like 14, 15 days.
Wow.
It was super short.
Yeah, because my Omega was like 8 weeks to have it serviced, but you had like a full repair.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly helped that it was just going to LA, so it was a day to get there and then a day to get back. They FedExed it back to me. They replaced the crown under warranty, so they gave it back to me in a little baggie. They even gave me the parts. Crown works flawlessly now, so no issues. And just as a recap, the problem was the crown wasn't resetting all the way to the inside position. So when I went to thread the crown in, the date or the GMT would jump, and that is not a good thing.
What has been your kind of watch obsession this week?
Yeah, a couple things. I mean, besides watching a tracking number and making sure that stuff got signed for, I have a little rant. I have a little rant rave. Have you heard the company Rue?
Their hands are very distinctive, aren't they? They look almost like an old school stopwatch or like a swimming clock or something. I remember. Or is it? Do they have one that's just like one single hand on the watch? They're very sort of retro.
This is it's retro 60s. It's like motorsports sort of chronographs. The style is that like Bauhaus sort of clean style from the 60s, 70s, I'd say. They make a bunch of stuff. It's mostly mecha quartz that they do, which I know Sam's not a fan of. I'm not a fan of. I mean, there are some nice mecha quartz out there, but
yeah, I mean, it's a great chronograph movement, but to me, I just can't stand the fact that it's got a 24-hour indicator, which nobody ever needs on a chronograph, and if you look at the watch, it's completely still, isn't it? Unless you engage the chronograph, there's no leading seconds.
Yeah, exactly. It's the 24-hour indicator. Fancy rally straps and different stuff. Very, very design watch. Very artsy sort of design watch in that realm of things. So they look good. And in that same vein, they have one of their new models came out on a gray silicone strap. And the gray strap, we'll put a picture in the notes. But this gray strap has got sort of like little dots, and it has some texture to it. And it looks super cool. It's got that sort of like futuristic, like 80s, 90s in the future sort of look to it.
All right.
And I was like, oh, that'll look good on one of my watches, one of my my Zin 144. And so I rushed over to the site. I clicked buy. It was, I think, $30 something. Free shipping, fantastic, no problem. Next, I get a tracking number in the mail, and it is coming from Asia. U.S.-based website, in U.S. dollars, and then sort of no indication that it was going to take 2.5 weeks to get to me. Sort of sad. I wish that these companies would start to, and we'll talk about a little bit of this, I'm sure, today with brands, but I wish that they would be upfront about this stuff. It's super frustrating when you're, if it's coming from Asia, just say it's coming from Asia. Set my expectations.
Especially with Amazon, we're used to like a couple of days of shipping and things like that, aren't we? So
exactly, like right, click button. Yeah, I mean, I ordered. I've got a little air filter for my office. It was in hours.
Weird that, isn't it? That same day shipping that they do. They do that for some things round our way. So I guess what I've been wearing, still been wearing the Ultimate Turtle a bit, but we've talked about that enough. I was also wearing, before I had to send it back, the Detroit Mint, the watch that I just recently reviewed on the channel, which is a kind of a homage to bullhead chronograph watches. The review I did, I kind of spliced in a lot of the footage that I could get hold of the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood film, because it just reminded me of Brad Pitt's watch in that film. Also, Mikola, who is a good friend to the channel, who runs Man Cave Leather, he made me a replica strap very similar to the one in the film, so I was so grateful to him and grateful to be able to review that.
Yeah, that looks great. Super good.
And then I've also been wearing I got a G-Shock in the end that I was happy with. I sent 2 back, and then I got the DW6900-1. I think I'm happy with that. It's the first time I've had that style. It's a very sort of classic G-Shock, the classic G-Shock style, not the rectangular one. It's slightly more round, but you'd know it as just that iconic G-Shock shape. But I quite like it, and the atomic time and solar is not too shabby either.
Yeah.
Watch obsession has actually been, it's weird, but that G-Shock watch, I'd never heard of this brand before. Hodinkee did a story of it, but it's called, it's either called Kith or Kith. I'm sure like the kids will murder me for this, because reading into it, it sounds like it's like Supreme, where they have their own clothing that they make. In particular, this brand makes sneakers, but then they do one-off collaborations. So I don't know if you're familiar with Supreme, but when they do these collaborations and they do all sorts of things, they did a brick, they did a crowbar. Yeah,
all their stuff sells out immediately. You know, people. Yeah, I'm familiar with it, but it looks the same. I just pulled it up on images. It looks the same sort of style.
Kith or Kith or whatever it's called. They've made that G-Shock in. They say it's rose gold, but it can't be. It's like $400. It's a rose gold coloured version of it, and it looks really cool. Like I love that. But I bet you Hodinkee is going to be released on the 10th of February, which was a couple of days ago, and I went on the Kith. Somebody's going to murder me for this. Going to be like, oh, it's Kith. I'm sure they've been sold out. I just had a brief look on the store, and I've not seen it, but from the images that Hodinkee have, it looks awesome. So there you go. Before we dive into the news, we've hosted this podcast on an app or a web service called Anchor. And one of the things that Chris and I haven't tried out yet is the ability for the listeners to ask us questions or leave us a voice message. What we'll do is we'll put the link into the show notes, and you click on it, and you can upload from your phone or you can upload through your computer, and you can ask us a question, leave us a voice message, and what we'll do is we'll play them or we'll answer the questions during these podcasts. We can actually splice them in. So if you want to do that, let us know. I'll keep plugging it each week because this is a new thing. I've not heard of another podcast doing this, but then I only listen to boring financial ones and maybe a few watch ones. But yeah, leave us a message if you want to ask us a question. Or what's the other way, Chris, that they can get hold of us?
We popped over. We'll have this over on Facebook. And so the Casual Watch Reviewers Facebook page, and we'll make sure to link to the podcast. And then we'll have a discussion underneath for each of the podcasts. And then we'll talk about kind of what's coming up and what questions you guys have for the next one. If you're not like me and comfortable with recording your own voice and then sending it to strangers.
Totally put you on the spot there. I'm glad you got the pitch right for Facebook.
It's fun. Yeah, I'm curious also to know if you noticed if everyone's noticed my new microphone. So it sounds like we basically teamed up. So
yes, yeah.
Hopefully, episode 4 of Chris is sounding a lot better, even with getting over a cold.
Oh yeah. No, absolutely. We're trying to slowly improve over time. And thank you for everyone that has so far sent feedback in. Mainly it's been email up to this point, thecasualwatchreview@gmail.com. But yeah, you'll be able to get hold of us on the Facebook group, and then you'll also be able to leave us a message on that link. So enough about that. Let's dive into the news. So first news story. We covered this last week, and is essentially that Swatch and also a large Asian watch and jewelry event have actually postponed because of the coronavirus. Now, this week, Seiko have announced that one of their major grand Seiko events, I think it was an anniversary event, I'll leave a link to it, in Tokyo, which was planned for March, they've moved that as well. We had a brief discussion about this last week, didn't we, Chris, that it was...
Yeah, a little bit.
Is this an abundance of caution, do you think, that these watch shows, and it's incredible, isn't it, that something that we hear about in the news has then encroached into the watch industry. It's not often that current affairs bleeds into the world of horology, really.
Frightening, but yeah, maybe a little bit too much. I mean, the lead news stories on our nightly news was the cruise ships that keep getting stuck because they either have a bunch of passengers that aren't sick, but just they don't want to have, the population, of a small country double. And so there's a bunch of cruise ship quarantine. We've heard about that. And yeah, it's I think it's good because they don't want to, open it to infection, but at the same time, we got to live our lives, so to speak. If you're sick, stay home, I guess.
So we'll keep an eye on that to see whether any other watch shows or horology events are postponed because of it.
I'm curious to know if it's just the watch industry or, if there's other things being affected.
A friend of mine who's in the technology, I'm in the technology, I think we're both in the technology industry, but he goes to like CES, and there's also a Mobile World Congress, which is in a big event. And they've cancelled as well, even though they're in Barcelona, I think because the various different vendors, a lot of mobile phones and things are made in China. So I think they've cancelled the event or they've postponed it.
I wonder when it'll be far enough away. Like, I wonder if we get into, we're starting in they're talking about, so here we are, February, March, April. I mean, is May going to be far enough away for these events to still happen or to be, tons of money gets put into these events, and to have to postpone them and change the date is super frustrating. But
yeah, I can't remember another health scare where they shut down so much transport and so many events were, because we lived through the bird flu, didn't we, and then swine flu in recent memory, and then there's that H1N1, was it called, and then there was SARS as well, where a lot of people unfortunately lost their lives. But I don't remember. Maybe I'm misremembering it, but I don't remember them shutting down so much transport and things like that. So obviously a developing story that will keep everyone up to date with. Mm-hmm. And then the next story, which broke today, and I was at work, so Chris was messaging me, but I just come back from work and we started doing this podcast, so I've not really looked into it. But it's an evolution of the Timex Q line of watches. Now, the Timex Q was a re-edition, or a sort of a homage to a previous quartz Timex. It's called the Timex Q, and then it looks good, and then they kept going crazy out of stock, and then flippers were flipping them like nobody's business. It was like flipping SeaWorld, there was that many flippers. and then somebody posted an image of that watch with a kind of a Batman color scheme, the black and the blue, saying there was going to be an automatic, and people are like, they just thought it was a mock-up, didn't they? It looked like a mock-up image, but then there was hints that this might be a real watch, and today, Chris, you've got all the details, but it looks like today they have released it as a watch.
Yeah, they did. It's not a GMT, but it's mechanical, and you got it. I think Timex was keyed into that. And speaking about flipping, let's start off the first Q that came out. There was talk about how many they were going to make, and sort of there's such a rush, and then they sold out, and then, like you said, they were listing them on eBay for crazy money because no one could get one. And then what was it? I think the summertime came and stock refilled back up for this watch. So it'll be very interesting to see now that it's an automatic. And we can go over the specs here. It's the model M79. It's a 40 millimeter. It's got a decently thin case, 11 and a half mil thick. Stainless steel, acrylic crystal, so some other stuff. But on this,
I wonder why they keep doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I get to save money, I assume. So it's got, okay, so it's, 50 meters water resistant. It's got its, so this new one is coming out, has an M79 movement, Timex M79 movement, which is the Miyota 8205. And so I was looking at the specs because we were kind of interested in this. This is 7S26, negative 20 plus 40 seconds a day. Japanese movement, hours, minutes, seconds, day, date. It's got a 40-hour power reserve, automatic winding. It runs at 21,600. 21 joules, but here's the best part. $279.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's about there, isn't it?
And so think that's MSRP for Timex. You'll be able to do better than $279. We've learned from the first one, from the first reissue, do not pay more than $279 for them, because Timex will make more.
It's amazing that, I mean, I was on in fact, I've removed myself off it now, but I was on a watch buy and sell group, and this one guy was flipping these like nobody's business, and people were calling him out on it. It's like, hey, it's just a legitimate. We should do a podcast on one day on these limited edition watches that, in particular, Hodinkee is guilty as hell for this. Is I can understand if you're, I could sort of understand if you're like Omega, one of the big brands, and you want to do a small run, a limited edition run of a watch that's many thousands of dollars, like the 50th anniversary, because they, like you mentioned last week, they're pumping out a lot of these Speedmasters, so they need to have some exclusivity to it. What I do object to vehemently is when you've got the likes of Hodinkee and other people making, I'd even go as up to saying an Oris, but making anything up to an Oris, so like Seiko's, Oris, swatches that they do, making watches that should be easily accessible to any watch collector, limited editions. I think it's nothing short of like gouging watch collectors, to be perfectly honest.
Well, and if they're charging, when they're charging extra for them, when it's more than, so you have the money, you have the exclusivity. It's hard because you have a bunch of this market is in the higher end luxury market. And so you say to someone who can maybe afford a $200 dress watch, and you say to them, I'm going to give you a luxury thing that you can maybe get that's going to be $400, and it's going to be super limited edition, and it sort of drives that like, oh well, this is luxury. At the same time, at that price point, as I said with Timex, they're making 1 million of them. They have the ability to make 1 million of them. So this we're living in this digital post scarcity world that it's like, if you want to try to find a World War II field watch that they only made 8,000 of, that's going to be limited, that's going to be scarce. But to have a company, to have a marketing company, I think maybe that's what it is, Sam. It's the marketing. To have the market, because remember, it's not the first sin. It's, you had to market yourself first. So that's marketing the first sin. So when they come out, you get the market, and they add their marketing prowess with something that they can make false scarcity. That's something they can charge a little more. I mean, I get you.
I'm sure it's going to sell out. I mean, it's not something that I would jump all over just because, I like the novelty of the Timex Q, but there's a lot of reviewers, even a reviewer that I've done, a couple of collabs with, Miguel at SoCal Watch Reviews. He's got one, Miguel. And I don't think he's like overly impressed with it. Yeah, shout out to Miguel. Okay, so final story before we dive into our main topic is I still have to upload a review of this watch, and I will do, but it's the Seamaster, the Omega Seamaster 300. This is the one, I think it was affectionately also known as the Spectre watch, because they did do a James Bond limited edition Spectre watch. Hodinkee have done a great article on 3 new versions of this watch. So they've got a steel version. They've also released a yellow gold, a Sedana gold.
So Omega rose gold, got it.
Yes, okay. Yeah, Omega's rose gold, and then a platinum version of this watch. Now,
wow.
we've got a theme of the last 3 podcasts where I've been talking about Omega's prices being a bit outrageous, but strap in for this. For the 18 karat gold one, this Sedana gold, the rose gold, is, and also the yellow gold. So yellow 18 karat gold or this rose gold, the Sedana gold, $34,200. And then for the platinum version, $66,000.
Yeah, I was gonna say twice that. Yeah, twice that. 66 grand. Platinum case too?
Platinum case, and then they've used a platinum liquid metal for the bezel. Now, what do you think of the way this watch looks? Because this watch is probably the most current Omega that has a military look to it. The dial has that classic military look. Does it? I don't know if it looks good in the precious metal.
Let's break this down. First of all, you get this in platinum. It's just hidden money. Whatever that feeling is when you want to be walking around with, $64,000 on your wrist, but don't want anyone to know. Okay, I guess that's one way to do it. As a 60s reissue dive watch, you probably know, but I'll say it again. I dislike the loom, the brown loom. And you know what? While we have Omega's attention, let's just say this. Dear Omega, if you made this watch in stainless steel with white or just off-white, not brown, just off-white loom, I would own a Master coaxial chronometer Speedmaster 300. I would own it because it would be amazing. But the brown loom kills me. I mean, here's my take on the gold. Like, it's like not a nice day date. It's like not a good looking dress watch. With the bezel. It's
a large watch anyway. I mean, I've reviewed one of these on the channel. I'm actually editing the review of this one soon. I was kind enough to get the steel version at Bob's Watches. It's not my favourite looking Omega, I have to say, but I can't fathom why they've made it in like a precious metal. You could argue, well, it's probably to compete with the precious metal Submariners, but a white gold Submariner would go up in value more than this platinum Omega. Plus, platinum, I've reviewed, I've held, on the channel, a platinum Rolex Presidential model, and it is heavy. It's the heaviest watch I've ever lifted. So this chunk of metal in platinum is going to be, you're going to end up stretching your wrist another. Your arm's going to be on the floor by the time you're finished with it. There'll be like a real medical condition. Yeah. What's
the dress? What's the Omega dress style?
The DeVille.
Currently.
The DeVille is the DeVille. And the Constellation, I think.
So the Constellation in rose gold, Constellation in gold, Constellation in platinum. These make sense. DeVille in gold, DeVille in platinum. You know what I mean? Like this makes sense to me because it's a dress watch. But to try and capture that sort of Rolex, like, I mean, this is the gold, the white gold, blue, the Smurf Rolex is what this is. Yeah. Where if they came out with a blue dial steel Rolex, I would probably buy one, but I can't. It's made of white gold.
Yeah, and you're right. I forgot to mention that. That's a good point, that the platinum version does have a blue bezel and a blue dial. So you can tell the difference between that and the stainless steel, but only if you knew what you were looking at.
Okay. So, all right. So if you're pickpocketing, that's that quiet hidden money, I guess. I don't know what that appeals to.
Okay. So before we dive into our news story, let's stop for a quick ad break. Okay, guys, welcome back. Now for our main story, and like last week, I've been pretty lazy on this one, and this is a story that Chris has been researching. So Chris, I'm actually quite interested in talking about this subject. So do you want to kick it off and then we'll have a little conversation?
Yeah. I was thinking and looking at brands, talking about sort of starter brands that you get when you first get involved in this hobby, and sort of how they evolve. What brands to go for, affordable versus luxurious, and then was surprised, this is probably about 2 years ago, I was surprised to learn how many of the major watch brands own each other or our conglomeration.
Yes.
Which is kind of fascinating. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and we're gonna kick it off with a game.
Okay.
All right. So I have done some research, and I have I got a handful. We'll see how this goes. I got a handful of watch brands that Sam has never seen, and I have no idea whether he knows about them or not. And I'm going to quiz him, and he's going to guess if it's an old brand, a new brand, and if it's old money or new money. So we should put together a jingle for this.
Okay.
Old brand, new money. All right. So first one, the brand is Aquadive.
Aquadive. That could be. There was a lot of watches in the 60s and 70s, weren't they, that were dive watches that were stamped. I'm thinking of the few that I've seen that have a very similar case shape to them. They were usually base metal. Ulster is one of them that I remember. So I'm going to say this is an old brand.
Okay, so yes, it is an old brand.
Oh.
So it was part of the Synchron group. It's old brand, new money.
Oh, right.
The same group, that Synchron group, they make those isofrane Tropic straps, or those isofrane straps, and they make Tropic straps.
Oh, they own the Tropic. They actually own the brand Tropic.
Right. Well, they also owned Doxa until like 1997.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so Doxa has really come back, and I think the Synchron group that has this Aquadive brand, I think they saw that and said, oh, maybe we should take advantage of that. So old brand, new money for that one.
Oh, interesting.
All right, next one. Loris.
So isn't Loris owned by Seiko?
That's correct. Nailed it. Yes, owned by Seiko. And maybe because you're British, maybe that's why. So
yes.
Dealer networks in Europe, Canada, South Africa, Fiji, and they said Oceania, but I believe they're talking about Australia and New Zealand can come too.
Yes. So this is a brand that you did used to see when I was a kid. I mean, maybe it's still around, but when I was a kid, you used to see it a lot in like department stores. So obviously we've got Macy's over here in the US, but there was a department store, well, there still is a department store called Debenhams, similar to a Macy's style, home goods and shopping. And I always remember, or I'm having a flashback now of seeing Loris in there. So yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, they make a lot of digital watches that Seiko don't make. So like the sort of like the cheaper end of the Timex kind of Iron Man type of stuff from memory. And maybe Casio, maybe the Casio digital stuff.
Yeah, they're definitely in that Target, Macy's, for $80, $20, $80, maybe up to $200. And they do, they have mechanical movements, but mostly quartz. All right, next one up, Raven.
Have I heard of this Raven
old brand? New money.
Raven. I think this is a newer micro brand, but on the higher end of micro brands using ETA movements, maybe?
All right. Yep. 2 for 2. No, wait. 2 out of 3. You got it. Yeah. So it's a new micro brand. Yep. Of the micro brands, this is interesting. These guys started in 2008. So they're, it's almost ancient micro brand. I mean, because like, we've had inundations of micro brands probably in the last 3-4 years. Just, yes. I mean, like Kickstarter, etc. It's just Kickstarter seemed to just multiply them. But Raven was around 2008 and cool, independent micro brand. And it just, I think it's, I have to look up more information on it, but kind of makes one sort of style and until it sells out and then goes off and does something else. So it's not, so it's not like it's not like the micro brands of today where they try to set up like a fleet of, you'll see these micro brands set up where they're just like, the website shows up and they're like, we've got a chronograph, we've got a field watch, we've got a diver, we've got a date jade, it's just like, yeah, there's no like specialization. I don't like that. What with Raven, it looks like they're very specialized. They're doing sort of these very interesting looking, unique looking dive watches. So check them. Dive watches and field watches. So.
It is interesting when they do that, but it isn't half a pain in the ass when you see one you really like and then you go on the website and it's sold out. And it'll never to be coming back again.
And that kind of goes back to our previous conversation, which was a company like Timex who says like, oh, we're only going to make X. And you're like, no, they're going to print money. And for $279 for that watch, that means that they have to make tons of them in order to get any sort of price break for a mechanical watch like that. So yeah, so it's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum where you're like, where you truly, you have a truly something that's rare, but yet, in a micro brand. So
yeah, and I think on that affordable end of the market, Timex do a great job, don't they? Honestly, I mean, they do that watch that trounces the Shinola. They have that Weekender watch. They do have like an American assembled brand. They've got some high end stuff they're trying to do as well. They've got like a small seconds. It's called like American History Book or something like that.
Timex is interesting. I'm kind of curious on your take. Timex is interesting because it is one of those brands that I think gets a pass from watch collectors, even though they're inexpensive. I mean, like the Timex Weekender, you can pick one of those up on Amazon for $55.
Yeah.
And they look great, and they have decent movements in them. I mean, for quartz movements, but it's interesting because if anybody else tries that, this really talks to the brand as the heritage here. And this is why like new micro brands that, they just pop on and they just shove this stuff out onto the field. And you're like, you have been a company for 3 years, or you've been a company for a year. There's no heritage, and it's interesting to see how they'll try to fill that with websites and stories.
Yeah, I agree with you, actually. I mean, some of those old Timexes, I believe even the Timex I've got that's from my grandfather, they made some of them in Great Britain as well. There was an assembly plant, so some of the ones you'll see inside assembled in Great Britain. And you're right, it is one of the brands that gets given a pass for having the more affordable end of the market. And I'd say another one was Casio as well, because if you think about the number of watch collectors that have that, that $10, the Casio, the F971. Imagine is it F971? Somebody will correct me, but that have that one that rave about it. But if somebody gave you a watch that looked like that was made by Nixon or one of the other brands, you'd give it back or you'd donate it to charity or something like that, wouldn't you? But it seems like it's got some... or that one that they do that's the world timer that's like $20, or the data bank that's like 35, which when I was a kid was like my all-time, that was my dream watch, was the data bank with the calculator on it. And then
mine was the I had the temperature, I had the thermometer on it, I had the temperature on it. And I love that watch.
Yeah, as I got more into watches, and I still occasionally flirt on eBay with looking for one of these, was the first, it might not be the first, somebody will correct me, but it was one of the first ABC ones, the altimeter, barometer and compass. It was like the PW-40 or something. When I saw that as a kid, I fell in love with that watch.
It was, that was catalog. That was looking through catalogs of watches, yeah.
But it had the like metal protector over the sensor. You could see the sensors weren't hidden. They were like bolted onto the side of the watch.
Before transistors were made.
Thing of beauty, but sorry, we digress there. So if we do it, is there another old brand, new money?
Yeah, all right. Well, I've got one more for you. All right, this last one. Anonimo. This Anonimo.
Is this like a Italian hacking collective?
Italian. All right. Okay.
Oh, it is Italian.
Good work.
That was a guess. So, and it's an Italian. Let's think about Italian watchmaking. Can I think? Somebody's going to kill me now. They're going to be shouting at the podcast, going, "Oh, there's lots of Italian brands." I can't think of another Italian. I'm going to say this is because I can't think of one. I'm going to say that this is an old brand.
Oh, Panerai.
Oh, of course. Yes. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah, of course, Panerai, but yes.
but they're not still. Are they still made in Italy?
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to say it's an old brand.
No. Well, they Swiss. Yeah, but okay. And new 1997.
Oh, really? And what type of watches do they make?
They're They're kind of a sports watches. They make sports watches. They make Italian sports watches and dive watches, and they have a sort of unique style to them. In the upper like 1,000 to 5,000.
So like a sort of a Yima or
yeah, maybe more so than that. And actually, I was going to mention that was my bonus round. Is it Yema or Yima? Can everybody correct us on this?
I know somebody that has one and they pronounce it Yima, so I'm going to go with them. And they're actually pretty cool. I mean, they're in the flesh. They're a little. They're just that wrong side of expensive for me that to take a punt on one, I wouldn't do it. But the one that I did see was pretty good, actually. There's a watch collector that, and one day we'll have to get him on the podcast. There's a watch collector that literally lives up the road from me, and his collection is it's eclectic to say the least. He's got the Rolexes and stuff, but he loves these thrift store find dive watches. He's got one that looked very similar to the Jaws watch, although
Eam is interesting. It's got so I think it's a little of both. So it's old brand, but it's definitely new money. So at one point, the Hattori group, Seiko, owned Yima way back.
Oh, really?
And more recently, since 2009, it's a French company, Ambre de Mortiaux Watches Group, owns them. They've really poured marketing into that renaissance of reissued, taking stuff that they did back in the 80s, 70s and 80s, and then pushing it forward. So interesting.
Yeah, and they've been playing the special limited edition game as well, I think, because this brand you do see advertised on Instagram quite a bit. They're one of the few brands that do a good job. I've noticed Seiko actually getting a bit better on the old Instagram recently. They used to be just awful, but now you definitely notice.
Yeah, they've been buying they've been buying Instagram ads, so they show up on mine. It's
interesting, isn't it, that these brands and how they're all kind of weaved together. Certainly new watch collectors, I wonder if they'd be surprised at the core brands that you think of, all the luxury brands, are really owned by three main companies.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's kind of talk about that, because if you are just getting into it or you've been into it, you probably know what the quartz crisis is. Seiko came out with the first quartz watch and everybody freaked out, and everybody being the Swiss watch industry. From that fracture, if you will, a ton of old brands just disappeared, and the way Swiss watchmaking was done sort of helped that happen, because you'll hear us talk about in-house movements, but back in the day, like that wasn't a thing. Like you got your gear train from this company, and you got your cases from this company, and your crystals from this company. You called your brand one thing, but you sold stuff as another brand to someone else, and you it was just a mix match. And what's interesting is a ton of these companies went away.
Yeah, it's amazing to think just how it seems almost criminal now, or it seems such a shame now that all these brands were lost. But at the time, mechanical watches, everybody had mechanical watches. They weren't anything special. And quartz came out so accurate, took a battery, and this just, people were just like, they'd taken a step into the future. It was like going from a pad and a pen maybe to, or going from like a manual car to an automatic, or it was such a leap in technology that people were like, well, why would I ever wear a mechanical watch again?
I think it's rotary phone to FaceTime. And so a bunch of the Swiss manufacturers consolidated, they consolidated their stuff, their brands, their parts, their pieces. You have some major players now. If you've heard of the Swatch Group owns a ton. Richemont.
Yep.
And Fossil. LVMH, Citizen, and then Seiko. And then you've got some independent but also huge Rolex, Tudor. There are a couple of Swiss watch brands that are out on their own, but Swatch Group stands out. If you didn't know, Swatch, I'll give you just like a top five here: Omega, Hamilton, Longines, Tissot, and Blancpain. Oh, and there's the list goes on.
Yeah, they own Lange, don't
and,
they?
Certina. Then there's Richemont, which so JLC, Jaeger LeCoultre, Vacheron Constantin.
Yep.
Piguet, Cartier. Those brands.
Yeah, it's crazy if you think about it in terms of because a Langenzoon and Vacheron are two of the brands that make some of the most more expensive than Rolex watches. I think a lot of new collectors I speak to, or people that are kind of into watches, are amazed that Rolex don't make the most expensive watches you can buy. There's this assumption that Rolex make the most expensive and far from it. I mean, in the watch world, Rolex is middle. It's a luxury sports watch. It's by no means a haute horology, or it's not. Then certainly not in the holy trinity of Vacheron, Audemars Piguet, and I'm forgetting the third one. Vacheron, Audemars Piguet,
and JLC maybe. The third one's always contested. Right. You get into the Richemont group, and I mean they have IWC, which is that's affordable, or what I would say like sports watch, pilot's watches, in that realm. But yeah, that haute horology stuff that those companies are making, that you're just just tens of thousands of dollars, and then it comes in platinum for another tens of thousands of dollars. So
I've not looked at this for a while, but if you've got it up in front of you, I'm going to take a guess at the LVMH, which is long form for Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy Group. So there's two party drinks in there, and then a handbag company. I'm going to take a guess at they own Hublot, they own Tag. I'm going to say they own Montblanc watches.
No, Montblanc's Richemont.
Oh, okay, I got that wrong. And then, of course, they definitely own Louis Vuitton, which I think isn't there like a mixed, in the watch collecting community, there's a mixed view of Louis Vuitton, because I think they make a high-end world timer watch from memory. Yeah. But then everything else is sort of, or a lot of the other stuff is like fashion watches.
Yeah, there's a couple of fashion brands that own, that are a part of groups that own watch companies and like have done collaborations. I think once you get into the sort of art watch style stuff, you start to see some of those luxury collaborations where you have, this is luxurious. We have luxurious watches, and I'm just trying to think.
And it's crazy to me that when you go shopping and things like that, and a couple of companies have reached out to me. I think there's certainly one in the UK, and they make a lot of watches for the fashion brands. So Coach, Gucci, all of these are made by a sort of a single source. So you go into Gucci thinking you're getting this high-end quartz watch, and far from it, really. You're literally paying for the name. I think the only one that gets a pass is Cartier, isn't it? Like, that's a... Although I suppose Cartier is not really a... Cartier is known for jewellery. It's not known for... I suppose, would you say it was a fashion brand? It's more of a jewellery brand, I suppose, but they've always got a pass,
I'd say
haven't they?
jewellery brand. Yeah, I'd say jewellery brand.
Yeah, they've always got a pass for their watchmaking.
There's one more that I'll mention here. Citizen owns some of the newer sort of up-and-coming brands. Alpina, Frederic Constant, Bulova. And Bulova's an old brand, new money, for sure. It's interesting to me where you can kind of dig in and hear the real stories, and you get that feeling of like, oh, these are pilots' watches that were worn, in the 50s, and these are jets and space, and this sort of call to that world that is intriguing, that's interesting, that's what is part of the passion of some of these watches and watch brands. There were so many watch brands that went defunct that now it seems like if you have a good marketing department, you can kind of reach in and grab a Swiss watch brand that went defunct because of the quartz crisis, in the 80s. Pull it out, mark it up on sticks, and kind of re-release it. And there are some brands out there that do a better job of that than others. It's certainly something to talk about, especially, this is what's interesting to watch, guys, is this brand true? I mean, just like Omega with their stuff, like, is what Omega is doing now true to what they were doing when they're selling watches to astronauts in the 60s?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, yes and no. And with Platinum Omega 300, I'm going to say no, but they make the current watch on the International Space Station.
And then what about Seiko? You mentioned them before.
Seiko, Grand Seiko, Pulsar, Orient. There's a whole spread in there. They own Orient, and so there's a whole bunch of watches there that
they make a great watch,
yeah.
Orient, and they of course they own the movement manufacturers as well,
Mm-hmm.
don't they? They own, obviously, the Seiko movements. They own the TMI brand and Epson movements as well. And you mentioned Fossil before, so people would probably assume Fossil is a fashion brand, but they have that movement, don't they? The STP or something. They bought a movement manufacturer.
Oh, really?
I think it's a clone of I think it might be a clone of an ETA movement that they own.
Yeah.
Famous for having this kind of gooseneck adjustment.
I see.
Which is a bit hard to explain without showing a picture. But they've started making movements for other brands. So if you ever see I think it might be STP1 or something, their movement. But yeah, I think Fossil is going to ultimately start making, I'm guessing, mechanical watches. Yeah,
to sort of chase, I mean, Timex clearly, I mean, based on the queue that we were talking about, they got the feedback and they're going to print money on that one for sure.
Well, it's amazing, isn't it? Because Timex, they obviously embraced the quartz crisis, went full in for quartz for 50 years? Timex have never had unlike, Seiko have arguably always had mechanical in their line. Citizen had one or two mechanicals that they still produced. But Timex was, as far as I know, was no more mechanicals. That's the end of it. And they probably got rid of all the machining and all of that. And then the Marlin, up until a few years ago,
it was only the Marlin, and that was only 2 years ago that they were like, this would be amazing if this was a mechanical watch. And they're like, yeah, we can do that. So it'll be interesting to see if Fossil does that. And right now, Fossil's the kind of the king of the fashion brands. Your Michael Kors, your Diesel, your DKNY, etc. So they're sort of a brand, they're sort of an owner of, you can kind of clump their stuff together. Whereas if I said Swatch, you wouldn't necessarily know that they, that your Blancpain was part of the Swatch group. So
yeah, there's an interesting story, isn't there? Because I think Jean-Claude Beaver bought Blancpain, I think, off Omega for a shilling and 2 buttons or something.
Right.
And then he built it up, and I think he sold it back to them for quite the profit.
So there's so this list right now, this is maybe dated, this might not be right, but it's fun sort of breaking this out, and if you're not new, if you're new to the watch stuff, and if you're getting into it, you got lots of brands to choose from, but knowing that you've got these conglomerations and partnerships and things, it's sort of fascinating. And certainly tell us what you think in the comments in Facebook, and try out our new voice or message. Leave us an audio message. That'll be fun.
As Chris mentioned, check us out. Leave us a comment on the Facebook group. As always, we appreciate you listening, and we'll see you next time on Casual Watch Talk. Thanks guys. Bye.